Welcome back to United Case Report, where every case is real, every verdict matters, and justice always has the last word. Today's case is one of the most deeply painful kinds of betrayal this courtroom ever sees. Not because of the money involved, though there is a great deal of money involved, but because of the timing, because of who the victim was, and because of the specific cruelty required to do what was done. A man named Raymond was dying. He was in hospice care. He had weeks, perhaps days left. His affairs were not fully in order. And his daughter, his own daughter, decided that this moment of his maximum vulnerability was the right time to act. She forged his signature on a legal document. She redirected his assets. And she did it while he was still alive, in the house too weak to stop her. She was caught on camera. Today, in this courtroom, the evidence speaks, and it speaks loudly. Raymond was 68 years old, a retired civil engineer from Charlotte, North Carolina. He had spent his career carefully, saved diligently, voiceover, and accumulated over the course of a 40-year working life a modest but meaningful estate. A paid-off home valued at approximately $310,000, a retirement account, and savings that brought his total net worth to just over $400,000. He had 2 children. His son, Daniel, lived in Seattle. His daughter, Linda, lived 20 minutes away and had been his primary caregiver during his illness. Raymond had a will. It was clear, professionally drafted, and divided his estate equally between his 2 children. $200,000 each, roughly, after expenses. Linda knew about the will. She had been present when it was discussed. She had, according to Daniel's account, expressed no objection at the time. But as Raymond's condition worsened and the timeline of his death became clear, something shifted in Linda. The document in question was a notarized amendment to a financial transfer authorization, a form that, if signed, would move the liquid assets from Raymond's savings and retirement accounts into a joint account that Linda had quietly opened in both their names 6 weeks earlier. Raymond had not signed this document willingly. Raymond, in the final weeks of his life, was largely bedridden, heavily medicated, and, according to his hospice care team, in a state of diminished capacity. He was not in a position to make complex financial decisions. He was not in a position, frankly, to sign anything meaningful. Linda waited until Daniel was back in Seattle after a visit. She waited until the hospice nurse had completed her afternoon check and left. She went into Raymond's room. There was a security camera in the room, one that Daniel had installed 3 months earlier, ostensibly for monitoring purposes, to ensure his father was being properly cared for. It was a small device, positioned on a shelf, visible but easy to overlook. Linda overlooked it. The footage showed everything. Daniel reviewed the footage from Seattle 5 days before Raymond passed away, during a routine check. What he saw stopped him cold. The footage showed Linda entering the room with papers. It showed her positioning the pen in Raymond's hand. Raymond, who was barely conscious, who responded with the slow, unfocused movements of someone heavily sedated. It showed her guiding his hand. And it showed her leaving with the signed document. The signature on that document, when examined by a handwriting analyst, bore virtually no resemblance to Raymond's established signature. It was the signature of a hand that was being moved, not a hand that was writing. Daniel immediately called an attorney. He called the bank. He called the police. The account transfer had already been processed. Approximately $197,000 had moved. Raymond died 11 days later. His will stood. Linda contested it immediately. But the contest failed because the will was properly drafted, properly witnessed, and there was no credible legal basis to challenge it. However, Daniel filed a separate civil action to recover the transferred funds and seek additional damages for the fraudulent conveyance, the transfer of assets through a forged document. Linda's attorney argued in the civil proceedings that Raymond had been aware of the document, that Linda had explained it to him, and that his signature, however shaky, was given voluntarily. The attorney argued that the camera footage was ambiguous and that guiding an elderly man's hand was not the same as forging his signature. Judge Judy received this argument with visible restraint. She watched the footage herself, in court, on a monitor that had been set up for exactly that purpose. When the footage finished, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she said, "That man did not sign that document. That document was placed under a hand that could not object to being used." Linda appeared in court without the confidence she might have had before the camera footage became the central exhibit. She maintained her position, that Raymond had understood the document, that she had explained it to him, that it was a financial planning measure he had agreed to previously in principle. Judge Judy asked her to describe the conversation in which Raymond had agreed to this measure. Linda described it vaguely. Raymond had said something about wanting to make sure she was taken care of. He had said something about not wanting complications after he was gone. Judge Judy asked when this conversation had taken place. Linda said approximately 3 months before his death. Judge Judy asked why, if Raymond had agreed to this 3 months prior, the transfer had been executed in the final weeks of his life, while he was in a state of documented diminished capacity, with no other family members present, using what the handwriting analyst described as a guided signature. Linda did not have an answer that addressed the question. "You waited," Judge Judy said quietly. "You waited until he couldn't fight back, and then you used his hand to take what wasn't yours to take." The room was very still. Judge Judy ruled in Daniel's favor. Full recovery of the transferred funds, $197,000, plus legal costs, plus an additional amount in punitive damages reflecting the deliberate nature of the conduct and the particular vulnerability of the victim. Total judgment: $231,000. In her closing statement, she addressed the specific character of the betrayal. "Inheritance disputes are common in this courtroom," she said. "Families disagree about money. That is human and understandable. But what happened in this case was not a disagreement. It was not a misunderstanding. It was an act carried out deliberately, with planning, while a man lay dying. It was an act that required his daughter to look at him, to look at her own father in his final weeks, and see not a person, but an opportunity." She looked at Linda. "I have nothing further to say to you." The criminal case ran concurrently. Linda faced charges of financial elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. The civil judgment stood independent of the criminal outcome. Daniel used a portion of the recovered funds to establish a small scholarship in his father's name at the university where Raymond had studied engineering. He said afterward that the judgment didn't bring his father back. It didn't undo the final weeks, which had been shadowed by the knowledge of what Linda had done. But it drew a line. It said, this was wrong. Clearly, provably, officially wrong. That mattered to him. There are cases that test the limits of what a person can do to another person and still claim to love them. This is one of those cases. Linda was Raymond's caregiver. She was the person he had trusted with his final months, his final comfort, his final days. And she waited until those days were numbered to take what she had already decided was hers. The camera caught her. The court held her accountable. The record is clear. Some things cannot be undone, but they can be named. And in this courtroom today they were. Thank you for watching United Case Report. Subscribe for daily cases. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The courtroom never rests.